It's the summer of 2012. Inside a packed auditorium in San Francisco, Apple is sitting at the absolute peak of its market dominance. Every major consumer technology category they touched over the previous 5 years had been completely redefined. Music, phones, and personal computing were never the same. The company valuation is skyrocketing, and the global technology community watches every keynote with a level of scrutiny unmatched by any other industry. On stage, executives unveil their newest proprietary piece of software, built to replace a foundational tool provided by their fiercest competitor. It was promised to seamlessly guide millions of users into the future. Yet, within hours of the software update being pushed to consumer devices, reports of deep systematic failures began rolling in from around the globe. Drivers navigating home found themselves guided onto active airport runways. Emergency responders were misdirected to incorrect municipalities. Major landmarks simply vanished from the interface. In Australia, local police were forced to launch rescue operations for travelers stranded in a remote desert. In a matter of weeks, a company defined by its obsessive, meticulous engineering became the subject of global criticism and intense public relations damage control. What few understood at the time was that this technical catastrophe was not a simple coding bug. It was the direct result of an underlying corporate Cold War that threatened the structural integrity of the iPhone ecosystem. To understand how Apple shipped a product that was actively unreliable, we must look at the hidden architecture of the mobile industry. When the original iPhone debuted in 2007, it lacked internal database structures for web mapping. To solve this, Apple formed a partnership with Google. Google provided the mapping engine and location data, while Apple designed the user interface. For 5 years, this back-end infrastructure worked seamlessly for hundreds of millions of users. However, a profound strategic conflict was brewing. Google was actively developing Android, a mobile operating system designed to directly compete with Apple hardware dominance. This rivalry reached a critical flashpoint over voice-guided, turn-by-turn navigation. Google had integrated voice navigation into Android devices, but refused to give the feature to the iPhone version unless Apple granted them deeper access to sensitive user data and location tracking. Apple leadership, fiercely protective of its platform autonomy and user privacy, refused. Following the passing of Steve Jobs in 2011, new CEO Tim Cook made a high-stakes, long-term strategic decision. Apple had to achieve total data independence. They decided to prematurely sever ties with Google and replace the default navigation engine entirely with their own homegrown solution. The fundamental error was a systematic miscalculation of the sheer complexity of mapping infrastructure. Building a global digital map is not a standard software development project. It is a massive, capital-intensive exercise in crowdsourcing, data modeling, and physical verification. Google had spent nearly a decade deploying fleets of camera-equipped vehicles, analyzing satellite telemetry, and manually correcting data errors. Apple attempted to duplicate this massive database in less than 2 years. Operating under strict corporate secrecy, they could not conduct widespread, real-world beta testing without alerting their competitors. Instead, they were forced to rapidly acquire a patchwork of smaller, third-party mapping data firms and stitch their data together. When iOS 6 launched in September 2012, this fragmented data architecture fractured under real-world usage. Because the data came from disparate providers, different datasets utilized mismatched coordinate frameworks. One database might track an entity by postal code, while another used strict latitude and longitude. When the software attempted to reconcile these conflicting files, it generated massive anomalies. Entire geographic regions were misplaced. In the United Kingdom, towns like Doncaster were corrupted into non-existent names, while major public transport hubs like Tokyo Station and London Paddington Station vanished entirely from the digital topography. Furthermore, the advanced 3D visual rendering algorithms, which Apple had promoted heavily during its launch event, warped the landscape. Landmark structures like the Hoover Dam and the Brooklyn Bridge appeared heavily distorted, looking less like structural engineering and more like melted geometry due to errors in how the software parsed altitude data from satellite imagery. It was essentially digital cubism, but probably not the kind Apple wanted. The consequences quickly escalated past mere inconvenience. In Victoria, Australia, the app erroneously placed the city of Mildura 70 kilometers away, directly inside the center of Murray Sunset National Park, a remote, arid region. Stranded motorists were left for up to 24 hours without adequate water supply before being located by emergency services. The institutional damage to Apple brands was immediate. The company had built its entire identity on consumer trust and software reliability. In response to the crisis, Tim Cook took an unprecedented step. He published an open letter directly apologizing to the user base, acknowledging that the product fell short of Apple standards. In a stark departure from corporate protocol, Cook explicitly advised customers to download competitive alternatives, including Google Maps via web browsers, while Apple worked to correct the underlying database. The internal institutional fallout was severe. Scott Forstall, the senior vice president of iOS and a longtime key executive who had worked directly alongside Steve Jobs, reportedly refused to sign his name to the public apology letter. Within weeks, Tim Cook fired Forstall, executing one of the most significant structural management reorganizations in the company's modern history. The 2012 mapping crisis forced Apple to get serious. They spent the next decade pouring billions of dollars into their own ground fleets and specialized aircraft to rebuild their world model from the ground up. Eventually, they managed to reach parity with their competitors, but that 2012 launch serves as a permanent architectural warning to the rest of the tech world. It proved that no matter how much cash or influence you have, you cannot just fast-track reality. If your strategic ambition is bigger than your data validation, you're just one software update from a public relations disaster.